On Friday, thousands of people took to the streets of the capital, Dakar, to protest oil contracts condemned as fraudulent. A new demonstration following accusations of corruption against the Senegalese president's brother.
It didn't begin with tanks or midnight arrests. It began with whispers and the slow unraveling of trust. Senegal, once a beacon of stability in West Africa, now faces a silent storm, its leadership fracturing from within. President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, once united by hope, now stand divided. Their partnership, forged in opposition, is cracking under the pressures of governance. The rift is public. Sonko accuses Faye of undermining him, while the nation watches, anxious and uncertain. How did two comrades become rivals so quickly? Senegal has long stood apart in West Africa, a nation proud of its unbroken democratic tradition. Peaceful transitions of power have defined its history, making it a regional anchor. The 2024 election was another peaceful milestone, ushering in a new generation of leaders. Now the conflict between Faye and Sonko threatens this legacy, testing the very core of Senegalese democracy. The nation faces a subtle internal threat, one that could redefine its future. Bassirou Diomaye Faye and Ousmane Sonko, once inseparable allies, now at odds. Sonko, the charismatic opposition leader, chose Faye to run for president when he was disqualified. Their joint victory promised a new era, with Sonko as prime minister and Faye as president. But soon after taking office, differences surfaced, publicly acknowledged by Sonko himself. He spoke of being sidelined, of political attacks from within. The trust that fueled their rise is now poisoned by suspicion. Their unity, once a symbol of hope, now hangs by a thread. The cracks appeared quietly. A missed meeting, a tense press conference, a subtle shift in tone. Insiders noticed the growing distance between Faye and Sonko. Whispers of disagreements over appointments and policy began to circulate. The alliance, once solid, was eroding behind closed doors. Sonko later admitted he'd tolerated the situation for months, confirming the unraveling had begun almost immediately. The public facade was crumbling, exposing a deepening rift. The whispers soon exploded into headlines. Sonko publicly declared his authority was being undermined, confirming the crisis. The media dissected every word, and social media erupted. Supporters of both men clashing online. International outlets took notice. Senegal's stability was now in question. The story shifted from hope to impending political divorce. The world watched as the nation's democratic image was put to the test. The rumors had become undeniable reality. On Dakar's streets, disbelief turned to disappointment. Young voters, once hopeful, now felt betrayed as their leaders fought. The infighting was seen as a distraction from real issues: unemployment, reform, daily struggles. The public began to question motives. Was Sonko being sidelined, or was Faye consolidating power? The opposition seized the moment, amplifying doubts and deepening divisions. The whispers had become a national outcry, echoing from the palace to the markets. Before the headlines, there was the alliance of Bassirou Diomaye Faye and Ousmane Sonko. Born in the trenches of opposition, Sonko was the charismatic heart, and Faye the strategist. They were two sides of the same coin, strengthened by shared sacrifices. Their vision: to reclaim Senegal's economic and political independence. They were architects of hope, giving a generation a reason to believe again. Their alliance was the vessel for a nation's dreams. The road to the election was a battlefield. The government, threatened by Sonko's popularity, used the state against him. Sonko was arrested and Pastef was dissolved. But these acts backfired. Knowing he'd be disqualified, Sonko anointed Bassirou Diomaye Faye as the presidential candidate. The slogan became Diomaye Moi Sonko, meaning Diomaye is Sonko. An amnesty law led to the release of both Faye and Sonko. Their victory was a stunning repudiation of the old guard. Faye won in the first round with 54% of the vote, a landslide. The inauguration of President Bassirou Diomaye Faye was a moment of immense national pride. At just 44 years old, he became the youngest president in Senegal's history. His first act was to appoint Ousmane Sonko as his prime minister, solidifying their power-sharing agreement. This move was celebrated across the country. They announced audits of the oil, gas, and mining sectors, signaling their intent to renegotiate contracts, create jobs, and lower the cost of living. For a moment, it seemed the revolution was truly underway. Looking back, the alliance of Faye and Sonko represents a critical chapter in Senegal's democratic journey. But as events would soon prove, winning power is one thing, wielding it is another. The very alliance that was the source of their strength would soon become the fault line along which their government would begin to fracture. The euphoria of their historic victory was short-lived. Once the celebrations faded and the complex business of governing began, the first hairline fractures in the Faye-Sonko alliance started to appear. The unity that had been their greatest weapon in opposition became a liability in power. The promise of Diomaye is Sonko began to clash with the constitutional reality. Senegal has one president, not two. Subtle but significant disagreements on policy and governance started to surface. These were not the passionate, ideological battles they had waged against the old regime, but quiet, internal struggles over the direction of the new one. The revolution, it turned out, had two competing visions for its future. These initial policy differences were compounded by personality and style. The honeymoon was officially over. The public started to see a government that seemed to be at odds with itself. It was cracking under the immense pressure. Nothing exposes political fault lines quite like the distribution of power. Cabinet appointments are the currency of political power, used to reward loyalists and shape the government's agenda. It was here that the idea of Diomaye is Sonko met its harshest practical test. Deciding who got what became a source of deep contention. Sonko pushed for his allies to be given key roles to ensure their agenda would be implemented. President Faye, however, sought to build a broader coalition. The resulting cabinet was a carefully constructed compromise. Allies of Sonko began to feel sidelined. It sent a clear message that President Faye was asserting his authority. The cracks had widened into visible fissures, revealing a deep and bitter struggle for control of the state. The tensions erupted into public view. Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko publicly criticized the president, confirming swirling rumors. Speaking to his party, Sonko laid bare his frustrations. His words were a direct rebuke of President Faye's leadership. Sonko painted a picture of a prime minister who felt powerless and undermined, lacking the authority to govern effectively. This public questioning of the president's motives was an open declaration of war, shattering any remaining illusion of unity. It set the stage for a dangerous political showdown, forcing the nation to watch the government's potential fallout. Coup d'états often conjure images of military might. But in Senegal, a nation that has famously never had a military coup, the threat is different. It is a silent coup, a seizure of power that happens in the backrooms of government. A silent coup is a political assassination, rendering a powerful figure irrelevant. In this context, the target is Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko. Whispers suggest a campaign to isolate him and transform his powerful office into a ceremonial one. It is a death by 1,000 cuts, a betrayal of the democratic mandate. The coup is not against the state itself, but against the foundational agreement that brought the government to power. The most important battle is for public perception, a war for the narrative. President Faye's camp frames their actions as necessary for constitutional order. They argue Senegal cannot function with two competing centers of power. Sonko's complaints are portrayed as insubordination threatening the government's stability. The narrative is one of responsible leadership, with Faye trying to steer the ship. Sonko and his allies fight back with a counter-narrative of betrayal. They frame Sonko as the guardian of the revolution, refusing to compromise. They argue a silent coup is being orchestrated by establishment forces using President Faye. Sonko is being punished for his fight against corrupt interests, a victim of a plot. The battle for Senegal's future is fought with words, defining hero and traitor. In Senegalese politics, history casts a long shadow. The current tension evokes memories of previous power struggles, most famously the 1962 crisis between President Senghor and Prime Minister Dia. Dia was accused of plotting a coup, arrested, and the Prime Minister position was abolished, concentrating power in the president. This precedent looms large, a cautionary tale about a dual executive. It created a tradition of presidential dominance. Faye's supporters justify power consolidation to avoid repeating the 1962 crisis. Sonko's allies view Dia as a progressive leader eliminated by a pro-French president, fearing Sonko faces a similar fate. The government ministries in Dakar are the engine rooms of the state, the places where policy is transformed from abstract ideas into concrete action. Control over these ministries is not just a matter of prestige, it is the essence of raw political power. The struggle between President Faye and Prime Minister Sonko has now cascaded down into these bureaucratic trenches, turning government departments into contested territory. Each ministry, from finance and foreign affairs to the interior, has become a front line in the silent war. The fight is over resources, appointments, and, most importantly, the authority to set the agenda for the nation and its future direction. Beneath the surface of official government business, a bitter contest for influence is being waged. Loyalties are being tested daily. A minister appointed by Faye might find their directives subtly slow-walked by civil servants loyal to Sonko's Pastef party. Conversely, a minister seen as a Sonko ally might find their access to the president restricted, their budget proposals facing unusual scrutiny, or their policy initiatives inexplicably stalled. This internal friction creates a state of administrative paralysis, where the gears of government grind to a halt, bogged down by political infighting. The promise of swift, decisive change is being consumed by a slow, bureaucratic war of attrition. The public declarations of disagreement from the top have given license for these battles to intensify. When Prime Minister Sonko speaks of a lack of authority, he is not just speaking about his own position. He is giving voice to the frustrations of his allies within the ministries who feel their power is being systematically eroded. They see Faye's allies creating parallel channels of communication and decision-making that bypass the formal chain of command, effectively rendering Sonko-aligned ministers irrelevant. This is the machinery of the silent coup in action, a quiet, procedural takeover of the state apparatus, one department at a time. This struggle is profoundly damaging to the nation. The Senegalese people, especially the youth who voted for a revolution, are watching with growing disillusionment as the government they elected seems more focused on internal power games than on solving the country's pressing economic and social problems. The battle for the ministries is not just a political drama for the Dakar elite, it has real-world consequences. It stalls progress, breeds cynicism, and wastes the precious political capital that was earned through their historic election victory, leaving a hopeful electorate to wonder if their leaders have forgotten who they are meant to serve. The Pastef party carried Faye and Sonko to power, fueled by Sonko's charisma. But now the party itself has become a crucial battleground in the power struggle. Sonko retains an iron grip on the party's base, while President Faye commands immense influence. He controls the resources that can keep a political party strong, creating a deep rift. Sonko is using the party structure as his fortress to rally supporters and pressure the president. President Faye has the power of appointment to build his own network, creating a faction loyal to him. This weakens Sonko's control, forcing party members to choose between symbol and office. This is a battle for the soul of Pastef, determining the direction of the political force that promised to reshape Senegal. In any power struggle, the ultimate question is always the same. Who controls the instruments of force? In Senegal, this means the police, the gendarmerie, and the intelligence services. While the nation prides itself on having a military that stays out of politics, a tradition that has prevented any successful coups, the internal security apparatus is a different matter. The loyalty of these forces is the final guarantee of state power. Control over them is the ultimate prize in the silent war between President Faye and Prime Minister Sonko. It is a shadowy struggle, waged far from the public eye, but its outcome will be decisive. As president, Bassirou Diomaye Faye is the commander-in-chief. The constitution gives him ultimate authority over the nation's security and defense forces. This is perhaps his most significant source of leverage over his prime minister. He has the final say on the appointment of top generals and police commanders. In a showdown, the formal chain of command leads directly to the presidential palace. This constitutional power is a formidable backstop, a silent reminder to all players that in the end, the state's coercive power rests with the head of state, not the head of government. This reality underpins all the other political maneuvering taking place. However, Ousmane Sonko's influence cannot be underestimated, even in this domain. His popular support, particularly among the youth, extends to the rank-and-file members of the security forces. Many of these younger officers and soldiers come from the same communities that form Sonko's political base. They share the same frustrations and aspirations. While their commanders may be loyal to the president, the allegiance of the men and women under them is less certain. Sonko's narrative of a betrayed revolution and a fight against a corrupt system resonates deeply, creating a potential for divided loyalties within the security services themselves. This creates a tense and unpredictable dynamic. The leadership of the security forces is caught in the middle, tasked with maintaining order while navigating the treacherous crosscurrents of a divided executive. Their loyalty is the ultimate check and balance in this power struggle. Any move by Faye to formally dismiss Sonko, or any attempt by Sonko to mobilize street protests, would be a severe test of where that loyalty truly lies. The shadow of the security forces hangs over Dakar, a silent, powerful arbiter in a conflict that is pushing Senegal's celebrated stability to its absolute limit. In politics, one man's crisis is another man's opportunity. The rift between President Faye and Prime Minister Sonko has not gone unnoticed by their rivals. The established political parties, defeated in the election, are watching with keen interest. The infighting has given them a new lease on life, seeing cracks as a potential entry point. The old guard is repositioning itself for a comeback, adopting a subtle approach as concerned commentators. They express concern for national stability, lamenting the government's amateurism, framing the power struggle as predictable. They are fanning the flames, hoping the structure burns down. These rival parties are playing a long game, selectively pouring fuel on the fire. Their goal is to ensure the fight continues, weakening both leaders and disillusioning the public. The opposition is working to ensure that no reconciliation is possible. They remind the public of their time in power, suggesting they provided stability. The role of the opposition has shifted to acting as a corrosive agent. Senegal's stability is a matter of intense interest to its neighbors and global powers. External actors are strategic players with their own interests at stake. The sovereigntist agenda promised by Faye and Sonko has made traditional partners, including France, nervous. The internal conflict is being watched closely and quietly influenced from afar. Diplomatic channels can subtly signal support. Actions are presented as standard diplomatic engagement, but can tilt the internal power balance. This adds a potent anti-imperialist dimension to the conflict. This international dimension makes the situation far more complex. It is now entangled with geopolitical rivalries and economic interests. External actors risk exacerbating divisions, transforming a domestic crisis into a proxy battle. The youth of Senegal were the engine of the revolution. They filled the streets, chanting and believing a new era had dawned. Now, as the alliance crumbles, their reaction is critical. The sentiment is one of disillusionment as leaders play political games. They voted for jobs and dignity, but are now souring on the president. Hope has been replaced by cynicism. The revolution is on hold, leaving its soldiers feeling abandoned. This fracturing weakens the demographic key to the country's future. The voice of the youth is a warning that their patience is running out. The crisis at the top has split Senegalese society down the middle. The division is not along traditional ethnic or regional lines. It is a fracture based on loyalty to one of the two men who once stood together. The public is being forced to take sides in a conflict they did not create, and this is creating new and dangerous fault lines in the social fabric. In markets, in workplaces, and within families, conversations about politics have become tense as people align with either the presidentialists who support Faye's assertion of authority or the loyalists who stand by Sonko as the true leader of the movement. The unity of the nation is being strained by the disunity of its leaders. The media plays a crucial role in shaping and amplifying this division. Newspapers, radio stations, and online news sites have largely taken sides. Pro-Faye outlets frame the president as a mature and responsible statesman, working to preserve stability against a reckless prime minister. In contrast, pro-Sonko media portrays the prime minister as a courageous truth-teller, a victim of a conspiracy to sideline him. This division is particularly visible in how the public interprets the words of their leaders. When Sonko publicly stated, "What is happening is neither good nor elegant," his supporters heard a brave man speaking truth to power. Faye's supporters, however, heard an act of gross insubordination, a public attack that undermined the dignity of the state. Every action and inaction is filtered through a partisan lens. Ultimately, a nation that was once united in its desire for change is now dangerously divided over how that change should be managed and by whom. The social cohesion that has been one of Senegal's greatest strengths is being eroded by this political civil war. The public is caught in the crossfire, their hopes for a better future held hostage by a power struggle that seems to have no clear end in sight. The country is holding its breath, watching the two men they entrusted with their future, now locked in a political embrace that looks less like a partnership and more like a fight to the death. The question is no longer just about who will win, but whether the nation itself can survive the battle intact. Senegal's crisis sends tremors across West Africa. While neighbors succumbed to military takeovers, Senegal stood as a defiant exception. It was the democratic anchor, a testament to strong institutions and peaceful transitions. The power struggle in Dakar is watched with anxiety by regional leaders and international observers. If Senegal unravels, it sends a devastating message that no country is immune to political decay. It would embolden military juntas and authoritarian leaders, justifying their power seizures. The current crisis threatens to erase Senegal's victory as a beacon of hope. The stakes extend far beyond Senegal's borders, impacting the Sahel region's dynamics. A destabilized Senegal could create a new front for instability, threatening regional bodies like ECOWAS. Beyond the political implications, Senegal's stability is a cornerstone of the regional economy. As a major port and a hub for investment in West Africa, its economic health has a direct impact on its neighbors. The country has been on a path of significant economic development, with major projects in oil, gas, and infrastructure attracting billions of dollars in foreign investment. This progress was built on a reputation for political predictability and the rule of law. The current power struggle between Faye and Sonko puts all of that at risk, creating a climate of uncertainty that is toxic for economic growth and investor confidence, with potential consequences for the region. International investors and multinational corporations are watching the situation in Dakar with growing alarm. Political instability is one of the biggest risks to long-term investment. The public disagreements between the president and prime minister, especially concerning the radical sovereigntist agenda to renegotiate contracts, create an unpredictable policy environment. This uncertainty could lead to capital flight, the suspension of major development projects, and a downgrade in Senegal's credit rating. Such a downturn would not be contained within Senegal's borders. It would impact regional supply chains, cross-border trade, and the overall perception of West Africa as a viable destination for investment. The economic disillusionment among Senegal's youth, who are growing frustrated with the lack of progress, is a warning sign for the entire region. High youth unemployment and economic stagnation are key drivers of instability and migration across West Africa. If Senegal's economy falters due to political infighting, it could exacerbate these problems, potentially leading to social unrest that could spill across borders. A prosperous Senegal acts as an economic engine, creating opportunities that help stabilize its neighbors. A struggling Senegal, on the other hand, could export its economic woes, adding another layer of pressure to an already fragile regional system. Ultimately, the regional stakes of Senegal's crisis are immense, weaving together the political and the economic. A failure of leadership in Dakar would not only weaken the forces of democracy, but could also trigger a regional economic slowdown. The fates of West African nations are deeply intertwined. A stable, democratic, and prosperous Senegal is a vital asset for everyone. The silent coup threatens to destroy that asset, creating a vacuum that could be filled by extremism, military rule, and economic despair, a ripple effect that would be felt from Nouakchott to Niamey and beyond. The future of the region may well hang on the outcome of this power struggle. In Dakar's tense political climate, reconciliation is the most hopeful yet difficult path. It requires President Faye and Prime Minister Sonko to rebuild their alliance. Respected figures may need to mediate a new power-sharing agreement, recommitting them to their promises. This involves substantive concessions, acknowledging each other's roles for effective governance. However, this path seems unlikely given the deep rift and broken trust. The political dynamics push them further apart, making reconciliation a treacherous journey. If reconciliation fails, Senegal faces a direct political confrontation. President Faye could dismiss his prime minister, a risky assertion of power. Ousmane Sonko would not go quietly, potentially leading to mass protests and economic shutdown. Alternatively, Sonko could resign, accusing the president of betraying their mandate. Either path leads to a political showdown, testing Senegal's institutions. This confrontation would paralyze the government and risk violence. The brink of confrontation could tear the country apart. In the quiet corridors of power, politics is often a game of silent signals. Instead, it could come quietly, with a simple handshake, a forced smile for the cameras, and a joint statement proclaiming that all is well. This is the outcome of a successful silent coup. President Faye successfully consolidates his power to marginalize Sonko and his allies completely. For the Senegalese people, this outcome would be deeply ambiguous. Sometimes, betrayal comes with a handshake that signifies a battle lost. The fate of Senegal's celebrated democracy rests on the shoulders of two men. Will their alliance be remembered as the dawn of a new era or the beginning of a silent, painful fall? This is Black Culture Diary. This is Inside Africa, where the continent speaks for itself.